My name is Alana, and I use they, them pronouns.
And my name is Jessie. I use she, her pronouns.
And we're making menches.
Making Menches is your home for queer, anti-Zionist Jewish ritual, radical education, and community.
Today, we are going to be continuing our conversation about the incredible Dwell in Revolution project. This is part 2 of our episodes about this scene, so if you haven't listened yet, last episode we talked to Micah Bazant and Ali Schwartz about the importance of ancestral connection.
We're going to get a chance to talk with 2 of the artists who contributed to the project, Hadar and Ayeola. And at the end of the episode, you'll hear one of the pieces read aloud by Shelby. Okay, let's just jump right in. Could you please introduce yourself and also introduce the ancestor or ancestors that you depicted in the Dwell in Revolution project?
So my name is Ayeola Omalara Kaplan. I am a illustrator, artist, abolitionist, and I illustrated Abraham Sephardi. And he is a Moroccan, Jewish, anti-Zionist organizer. He lived from 1926 to 2010. One of my favorite things to do as an artist is to shine a light on, celebrate ancestors. Something that I have always really appreciated seeing other artists do. It's something that I've done in the past with ancestors like Malcolm X, Assata Shakur, Martin Luther King, Thomas Sankara. And I've always really intentionally celebrated ancestors who were really strong in their politics and their faith, like those two things being their guiding forces. Because I think that today there's this struggle of how do politics and faith interact with each other. And I think that our ancestors do a good job of showing us how they can interact in a positive way and an inspiring way. So being a part of this project felt really cool to do that with a bunch of other really cool artists, specifically with anti-Zionism and Judaism, which is something that I have been wanting to explore more, especially now with Israel increasing its genocide in Palestine. I was initially feeling really weird and alone as an anti-Zionist Jew. So being a part of this project and helping other anti-Zionist Jews realize that there's this huge history of Jewish anti-Zionism and that we're a part of a longer legacy, that felt really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think that your depictions of ancestors and also just of radical and revolutionary politic are really powerful. But I'm hearing that you were already really invested in depicting ancestors in your artwork, especially radical ancestors, also as a way to help connect you to that value of your own. I'm curious if working on the project impacted your own relationship with ancestral connection at all, and if you could speak more broadly to your relationship, even outside of art, to ancestral connection.
In researching this project and reading Abraham's writings, it was just such an incredible experience, and it was so affirming for my beliefs. It just reminded me how important it is to engage in the historical research aspect of being the type of artist that I like to be. Sometimes I get a little overwhelmed and I don't engage in, I think, depicting artwork that has a more serious, or it feels really important. This piece felt really important, so I researched it a lot. And in doing so, I was reminded that's something that I love to do and I shouldn't be intimidated by it. And it was really nourishing. And I'm so glad that it could nourish other people who didn't know about Abraham before this. I didn't. And it's so shocking because there's so much information about him and he's written so much. And I feel that way about a lot of the ancestors that I illustrate. I'll create pieces and they'll be people's first time interacting with them. And I just want to help more people engage in this ancestor, more ancestors. So this is really inspiring for me to keep doing more work like this.
You already walked us through a little bit about how you prepared by really
delving into his work and spending time with him through his writing as much as possible. But I'm curious, how else did you prepare to depict a movement ancestor? What was your process, or what other media were you consuming when you were making this piece?
I really wanted to illustrate a communist ancestor because I myself am communist, and I find that I feel like communism is so taboo, and I really wanted to illustrate someone who I could really identify with as a Jewish person, as a communist, and as a person with a marginalized identity. So I really wanted to find an ancestor in that realm. And I was so excited to find Abraham because he's just clear on his politics and on his Judaism and how they inform each other. I feel like I'm a bit nervous to be myself politically, spiritually in different spaces, whereas I feel like he was all of his identities all the time. And they always communicated with each other and everything that he was doing. So that was really exciting. And then once I was assigned Abraham, I did more deep dives into his writings and just so poetic. And usually I try to illustrate them with something that kind of speaks to their like personal identity. So not just a portrait, but like them with an item or like something that speaks to their depth. And Abraham was incredibly like verbose and like his writing. So I wanted to put him with a book. I went through his writings and I read through what was he saying that I feel like could be translated visually, but also I just wanted to show his words too. That's something I like to do with my artwork is also include a quote from the ancestor because I feel like people don't read anymore. But there's no way I can actually draw him without actually including his words because if you just listen to what he's saying exactly as he's saying it, that's where the magic is. That's where the truth is.
I heard you saying people don't want to read anymore the same way that is it Kim Kardashian the quote?
Oh, yeah.
No one wants to work anymore. That, but no one wants to read anymore. And it's real. It's hard. But yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing your process. I just really resonated with what you said about it can feel like scary and difficult to be vocal and firm in our politic when it feels like there's so little of that around us. But then being able to call back to ancestors and people who were alive far before we were feels really grounding and feels like, oh, okay, like this has been here, this will continue to be here, and we're just like a continuation of a lineage, not like starting a new movement. The quote at the end of the written piece about him is like him saying, "Rise up against your oppressors, against the racist and criminal Zionist rulers." That goes so hard.
You're right. That quote does go so hard. I was really happy to see Adam included in the piece, and I love that we both couldn't really resist using like those specific quotes in our work. I really wanted to show in my piece through the illustration of the tree and also tying that back to the writing of Abraham where he talked about how can my people go and uproot trees in Palestine. I feel like the tree is an awesome symbol for movement work. We're always drawing on like the energy of our predecessors, and that's like leading us, giving us the strength to push forward and grow and stand tall in whatever morals that we're trying to like advocate for, whatever like human rights we're trying to fight for.
And I want to speak on like why I included Evelyn in the piece. And that felt important to me to include because there's just so many people who resisted oppression and didn't get to survive and write books about it, or didn't get to survive and tell their story and kind of be a part of the known history of ancestors. Like, because Evelyn was captured and tortured for her resistance, and she died from the torture that she experienced. We can't change what happened to her, but I think we can change like how we interact with her story by not letting it be like a footnote. It's just hard because there's just so many people who never really got free from like their incarceration, and there's so many that are still like incarcerated all over the world for speaking up against oppression.
And that brings me to a point that I want to talk about, which is how Abraham was not just like this incredible writer, like
his organizing and his commitment to resistance, regardless of the threat of incarceration, is just really powerful.
The fact that he was exiled twice from his home country and then incarcerated, I think he had the longest time in jail after Nelson Mandela. So that was really inspiring to me because I'm engaged in activism mostly around prison abolition and also just police brutality and the Stop Cop City movement in Atlanta. And I've been trying to organize in that space. And there are so many problems that come about. But I think the biggest problem that I experienced that I can relate to Abraham's experience is just like this fear of like incarceration. The reason I'm most passionate about prison abolition is because I feel like it's the number one obstacle facing organizers. No matter what you do, that's always the go-to punishment that the state uses on people. And I feel like if we were to have successful prison abolition, there's no end to how much like liberation we can achieve if we're not also dealing with this fear of going to jail for marching or going to jail for doing a picket line or whatever. And also just knowing that isn't the end of the world. I did a protest in defense of this forest that's being destroyed in Atlanta in order to build a cop city, basically a cop playground where they can practice terrorizing civilians in urban environments. And it took a lot of people like Abraham, like Martin Luther King, like Assata Shakur, like knowing there's this history of revolutionaries like facing possible incarceration in order to protest, like knowing that they did that, they got through it, and that it was so important for the movement. It took a lot of like their sacrifice to feel comfortable, not even comfortable, but to feel able to do that and take that risk. And then luckily, there was a lot of support on the outside, and I was able to be released from jail after being arrested from the protest. And I read it was similar for Abraham when he was incarcerated. It was really just like the support from the people on the outside, the organizing community had built that was able to help him get free. And that's just really inspiring to me that no matter what you do, even the worst possible situation, if you're like operating in community with support, people who share your beliefs, even the worst thing that the state can do to you, they can't get away with. And it's lifelong too. I was just reading this interview he did where they were asking him, why do you still believe in communism when the Soviet Union failed and so many other communist projects have failed? Like, why do you still believe in it? And he said that when we were transitioning from feudalism to capitalism, that was a very long transition over centuries. So we can't really expect communism to just happen within 1 century or two. Like it's going to take a lot of failures, a lot of struggles. And we just have to learn from all of them, especially the movements in like third world countries. I like to say underdeveloped countries, but he's third world. And he also was organizing like all the way into his elderly years. I was hoping that my protest would stop the Cop City from being built. It didn't. It's still being built. It's a lifelong struggle. So I'll probably still be doing this when I'm old, and that's to be expected. And it's important because if I were to stop now, if any of the other ancestors were to have stopped after their first failure or obstacle or first time being taken to jail, we wouldn't have progressed the way we have. It's really all about toiling and toiling until justice is achieved. It's beautiful to be part of such a long legacy.
110%. Yeah, it's so important to recognize that we need to have, there needs to be longevity, and we need to find ways to maintain our being steadfast in the struggle. And I think part of that can come from reflecting on other examples of ancestors who were doing this their whole life and are still alive and doing this, or were doing this up until they passed. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing, not just through your art, but also like on the ground in Atlanta. I know the like effort to stop Cop City in Atlanta has been ongoing and a true struggle, and that struggle is going to continue.
We definitely have to draw from each other forever. The struggles are somewhat, I really do believe in a future where we have achieved human rights for all people. And yeah, thank you so much for for having me and for these really awesome questions.
And now we'll hear from our second artist, Hadar Cohen.
My name is Hadar Cohen. I currently reside in Brooklyn, which is new. Originally from Jerusalem, and my ancestors come from all over the so-called Middle East, from Syria and Iraq and Kurdistan and Palestine. And I teach spirituality and also do a lot of work around Arab Jewish identity. And yeah, I'm also an artist. And the artist I worked on for this project is Salim Halali. I feel like I was really blessed to have researched him more and to write this beautiful dedication to him. He is such an amazing person and that left such an important legacy to the whole world, really. And I think we can get more into that, but I think so often in the Jewish community, we've erased such central figures, specifically who are Arab Jewish or coming from the region. But Salim, he was Algerian. He was born in Algeria. And when he was a teen, he moved to France and he became one of the most important musicians, both in the Arab world and in the Western world. He was very notorious for mixing styles, for bringing Arab music with Andalusian music and also improvising with Western music. And I think his character is so multidimensional in that way. Even just the way he dressed or the way he spoke, he wasn't afraid to be too much. And just the creativity was really profound. And he was also gay and he was queer and he sang about it. And he was unashamed of who he was. And I find that really inspiring because I think so many of us wrestle with shame around our lineages or our ancestry and where we come from. And yeah, I just find so much inspiration in the way he just claimed who he was. And his life wasn't necessarily easy or simple because he was queer, he was Arab, he was Jewish, but he just wore it all with such grace and opulence. Part of his story is when he was in France, the Nazis, of course, started targeting Jews everywhere in Europe, and the Great Mosque of Paris housed Jews and hid them in the basements and protected and saved hundreds of Jews during that time, including Salim. And because the founder of the mosque actually loved his music so much and felt so connected to it, he went above and beyond to specifically protect Salim, and they even issued fake birth certificates that they were Muslim, and they made a fake graveyard in the back that, oh, their father was buried here. And this is how hundreds of Jews actually survived. So I think that this is just such a profound story that also doesn't get told a lot. You mentioned Ayeola Zulai, who's a brilliant scholar, and I've learned so much from her. But she details how European colonial logic actually is so invested in dividing Jewish and Muslim communities. And you really see it today all over in Germany, in the UK, everywhere, that Jews are used against Muslims. And there's a way in which anti-Semitism is used to perpetuate more Islamophobia. And that all is built on erasing these histories. And then it's fed to Jewish communities that Muslims are the enemy or you should fear these people. And we forget actually that there's been so much solidarity between the Muslim and the Jewish community. And that's actually how my family got to Syria in the first place. They were displaced from Andalusia in Spain, and Muslim communities all over the world, all over the Middle East region, welcomed Jewish people and celebrated them coming and integrated them. And there's so much beautiful culture that was born from that. So yeah, this is something that feels really deeply connected to my heart and to my work, is to both tell those stories, but also revive that work of solidarity between our communities. When people find creative expression to relate to ancestry and lineage, it's really moving for me. And I think that a lot of times we want to move forward, but it's also important to look to the past. And there's so often that we want to reinvent the wheels and create new projects and new ways of thinking. And we forget that there were actually beings who came before who have something to offer us. And either they were erased from history or we just weren't taught about them. And of course, for deliberate and political reasons. And I think it's really important, especially around Zionism, because it's just so distressing how the narrative is so often that all Jews are Zionist and Zionism has been around in the Jewish community for so long. And when you actually look at the history, Zionism is a really new invention in Judaism, only in the last like 150 years maybe. And when it first started, it actually was very much not accepted by the majority of Jews. And yeah, I think that bringing the stories of anti-Zionist Jews, of activists, of elders, of people who came before us is repairing the harm of forgetting our lineage and kind of that distorted narrative that Zionism has created, that we were always just committed to this project.
I'm curious how this project specifically impacted your relationship with ancestral connection. And maybe if you could tell us about your relationship with connecting to ancestors more broadly, if it exists.
Yeah, ancestral work and cultivation is really important. And it feels like an art that we lost in modernity and in the Western world. It's really beautiful to have projects and opportunities to embrace that practice. Yeah, ancestral work feels really sacred to me. I come from a family that had a very long family tree that was pretty well tended. I could name 10 generations back around who was who, what were their stories, what was their love dynamics. And I think when I was a child, didn't appreciate that as much. I was like, why do I care who came 3 or 4 generations before me? But I think when my grandmother died, that's when it really hit me, because I was really faced with this question of what is it that I'm continuing? And I think we all have that in that moment when we become an adult, that it's not just that we receive the world and we try to make our way through it, but also what are we passing on, right? Not just what we're inheriting, but what do we choose to bring to the next generation and to the world? And yeah, that's when ancestry work became really important to me. And my grandfather passed away when I was young, but he's in some ways my first spiritual teacher. He was a prayer leader in the Syrian Aleppo tradition and was very well versed in the Arab musical tradition. And actually, when a few years ago I inherited a lot of his tapes, the cassette tapes, so I've been documenting them and archiving them and playing around with them. That's all to say that part of why I was so attracted to write about Salim is because there's such a depth around Arab music in general, but also specifically Arab Jewish music, that for me, even inheriting cassette tapes, even having ample opportunities to find Makam teachers, it's still so hard to access and to find places to really practice and to sing in those traditions. Like, it's still seen a bit as either exotic and it's wow, that style of singing, or it's a bit strange or weird. It doesn't have its proper honor. And especially when you're learning Western music, the Makam scale, the Arabic music, is so foreign. And to me, there's also been just a huge devaluing of those traditions. And I think especially when you look at the 20th century, like what was happening, of course, in Egypt, but also in Tunisia and Algeria and Morocco and Iraq, there were such profound Jewish singers and Arab singers that really changed the world. And yeah, I think I've always actually wanted to do an art show specifically about Arab Jewish musicians and documenting their legacies and their styles. And one thing that I also love is that, especially in this musical tradition, there's not as much separation between the religious and the secular. What was happening in the synagogues was also what was happening in the streets, and the traditions of music were going within the kind of sacred religious temples and the outside bar nightlife world. So yeah, and it took me, it's something I grew up listening to Kulthum and so many amazing musicians, but it took me a while to really realize actually there's a legacy of Arab Jewish musicians that didn't just change Jewish music, but actually changed Arab music and world music and were central people that so many people look to and revered. Another person that I just really admire is Layla Murad, who was Jewish. She eventually converted to Islam, but her brother sang all these incredible Yom Kippur melodies that are so understudied. And she was one of the most like prominent Egyptian singers. And yeah, I think that there's just such beautiful history there that is just covered over. And to me also holds the key to a lot of to building the type of world that I actually want to live in, which is really about Jewish people being part of the world, not being segregated from it. I think Zionism has really, of course, ruptured so many communities, and specifically in the Arab Jewish tradition, really just erased our stories and our connection to Arab Muslims, Arab Christians, and the whole region. And when I learned that there were Arab Jewish musicians that were loved and revered by people of all faith from the countries that we came from, it was really a big moment for me because I was like, that's not really the history I was taught in Jewish tradition, like in Jewish schools. I was very much taught the world hates us and we were always isolated. And of course, this is in some ways a more Ashkenazi dominant narrative that we were living in shtetls and we were rejecting the world. But what if Jewish history also included Jewish people being celebrated for their creativity and their style and their offerings to the world? And what if they were actually integrated?
It's so easy, as you're sharing, to whitewash our history and to say Jews have always been Zionists and Jews have always been separate from other parts of their societies and Jews have always been ghettoized. And it's so exciting to find stories and that kind of break that mold and say we have always existed in this way and we will continue to fight for a world that looks like this. And if not like this, because it's not to say that everything that Halali went through was better or like good. It's just that right now, having a story of somebody who lived purely in their identity authentically and did not give in to that narrative of separateness and refusing to engage with the world because of fear of anti-Semitism is so important for our movements. Can you tell us a little bit about your process creating this written work?
I know a couple of like music archival projects, specifically of Arab music. So I looked within those. And yeah, first just started harvesting and also talking to friends, especially amongst my Arab community. He's such a prominent figure that so many people have ideas or stories or ways of thinking about him. So yeah, just weaving that in as well. And I also will say that I also tap into my body and my experience and how I want to bring my voice through honoring him. And I think for me, growing up as an Arab Jew in Jerusalem, like I just grew up with so much shame around who I was and where I come from. And I never thought in a million years that I would ever have a possibility of creating art and for that to be relevant or touching people in the world. Like I just felt, okay, like I'm just trapped here in this place. And yeah, there's no way for me to get my voice out through who I am. There's been too much political oppression. There's been too much political chaos and political segregation for me to matter and my art to matter in the world in this way. And especially Arab Jewish lineage and identity is disrespected in Israeli society. It's just deeply disrespected. And sometimes in overt ways and sometimes in subtle ways. So I really wanted to write something that would feel like I'm giving Salim the proper honorance, that I was actually respecting him, that I was giving him a platform to be recognized and to be integrated into our Jewish ancestral stories. And what is that place of actually bringing respect again to these lineages? Yeah. Which sometimes it's like, for me, I'm like, I can't believe I get to do this work. Like, it really is so far from what I thought I could even do in this world. I have a mystical school where I teach Jewish mysticism, and we have these weekly Hebrew Bible class, and it's been so multi-faith, and I have a few Muslims who come because they want to learn more about Judaism, and it's been so healing and transformative because it really made me realize that, especially like studying Judaism, especially when I look at Arab Jewish history and the tradition that I was passed, like Arab Jewish scholars were all learning the Quran. Islam heavily influenced Jewish tradition, whether it was in Andalus with the Kabbalah and mysticism, or also later on, there's been just such a deep way in which Islam has actually informed the evolution of Judaism. And I just felt that in order for me to access my own tradition, my own Jewish tradition, it's impossible to do without also studying the communities and the traditions that were also in relationship and influencing it. So it just feels like a very deeply healing space to learn the Torah together in a multi-faith space that welcomes Muslims. And I just always find that their insights are so on point because they also, the Quran knows the Bible. It's coming from that awareness as well. Yeah, even just religiously, there's just so much connection that is just very understudied.
Your class sounds beautiful. For folks who maybe are interested in attending or interested in following your work in other ways, what's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, you can join classes whenever you want at malchut.one, malchut.one. And if you want to contact me personally, you can go to hadarcohen.me. That's my personal website. And I also have a Substack, which is my newsletter where I share different events and writings. You could just look Hadar Cohen on Substack, and my Instagram as well, Hadar Cohen32. And I'll also give a shout out to my podcast, Hadar's Web, which I interview different people on. You're always welcome to listen to Hadar's Web on podcasts.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Hadar, it was so great having you here today. And thank you again for your contribution to Dwell and Revolution and allowing us to learn about Salim.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to close out this episode, we're really excited to have Shelby reading their poem about Marek Edelman.
To close out this episode, we're really excited to have Shelby Handler reading their poem about Marek Edelman.
Marek Edelman, guardian of the Jewish graves. After the war, you learned how the heart works. After the uprising, you escaped through the arteries of Warsaw, through sewers to the Aryan side. After the escape, you lived quietly behind a wall until the entire city revolted. After you were orphaned, the Bund was your second mother and raised you. After 3 weeks of fighting, you insisted we were beaten by the flames, not the Germans. After you were born, the records were lost and the borders redrawn. After you died, you were swaddled in your second mother's flag and sung her oath. After the war, you refused to leave for Palestine. After the war, you were the last Jewish fighter left in Poland. After everyone died or fled, your tenderness matched your fierceness. Here is where my people are buried. After the uprising, you penned its bravery. The 3 weeks of bullets rained down on the hated German helmets, the hated German chests. After a lifetime, you resisted its exceptionalism. People have always considered shooting the highest form of heroism, so shoot we did. After the war, you stayed, tending the tension that pushes blood through the body. After the war, you healed the chests of the grandchildren of Poles who fought beside you. After the war, you knew all the others who were sent to Treblinka, they had to deal with certain death. It was easier to die fighting than in a gas chamber. After 48, Israel erased you from the uprising, refused to translate your Polish into their invented Hebrew with new words for soil they'd barely touched. After your wife and children left, you stayed, grazing your palms across your comrades' graves, the clovers growing towards your still warm skin. After everything, you knew the whole of what home is. Warsaw is my city. It is here that I learned one must always take care of others. It is also here that I was slapped in the face just because I was a Jew. After the war, you picked a plum, juice ran down your wrists, and you noticed how it was not blood. After medical school, your hands shook more in the hospital than they ever did in combat. After 67, you asked the Israeli press, what Jewish people are we talking about? After each winter, you offered yarrow, lilac, foxglove to the ghetto to all those you served beside. After your letter to the Palestinian resistance, the Israeli press boycotted you. After you were born, thunder bellowed from a far-off forest. After you were born, a century of blood loomed. After the war, you whispered to a birch, promising to stay. After the war, chamomile still grew near the gate, nettles still stung your ankles. After everything was gone, you planted your feet in truth. The Bundists did not wait for the Messiah, nor did they plan to leave for Palestine. They believed that Poland was their country. After you died, we learned your name and held it tightly, whispering it to the birches we grow beside. After you died, after you were carried through the city, after you were buried, after the buildings were razed, after the streets were renamed, your ghetto stayed at the heart of the city, the heart of the heart, where the blood came from and where the blood went.
Thank you so much to all the Dwell in Revolution artists who joined us for this episode. You can find Ayeola's work at ayeola.org. That's AYEOLA.org. And you can find Hadar's work at hadarcohen.me. Also Hadar's classes at malchut.one, malchut.one. Also Hadar's podcast, Hadar's Web. And we just want to say one more time, thank you so much to the incredible Dwell in Revolution artists who made this podcast possible. Dwell in Revolution, Ancestors for a Judaism Beyond Zionism is available for purchase on pushcartjudaica.com.
Thanks for listening to Making Menches. As an explicitly anti-Zionist grassroots org, we don't receive any institutional funding or support. Please consider supporting our work by funding us. You can find the donation link on our website, makingmenches.com. You can follow us on Instagram at Making Menches. We host monthly Shabbats both in person and online, so make sure to sign up for our newsletter, which is on our website, to get updates.
Making Menches, the podcast, is produced by Alana Lipkin and Jesse Sander. Intro music is by Nate Sander. Editing by Jesse Sander.